Um, let us open this podium session with such a wonderful name for a session. It must be great. And so, just as in the previous session, we'll first hear the presentations. We have four of them. They are more project focused, and then we'll open for joint discussion. Let's start with Dr. Jasmine Jossin. She holds a PhD in environmental psychology, and she works at the German Institute of Urban Affairs in Berlin with a holistic and integrative perspective on sustainable development. Her project, one of which she'll present today, tackles the local level implementation of the SDGs that we've heard about before, and the new urban agenda. I wonder what that is. And sustainability assessment and future visions. Jasmine is a passionate, so she says, about transformative education and co-leads the research project, which she'll present now, of urban extopias. I really look forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm presenting to you a transformative and also transdisciplinary research project that I'm co-leading that appeared from quite an innovative funding program from Robert Bosch Foundation, which started with a 24-hour workshop where 100 people from science, from activism, from arts and design came. The program is called Place-Based Design Urban Transformation. And it was a competition, and the result was the project I'm explaining to you. So the team which does the project together with me is very diverse. We have people from ecology, engineering, planning, but also activists, designers, and a clinic clown, which is pure pleasure. So I can really recommend you have a clown in your research teams. Yeah, so basically, in a nutshell, what we are doing is we design interventions that invite people and try to motivate people to participate in the debate on how we want to live in the future city or how we do not want to live in the future city. And we also try to invite them to formulate own new visions, future visions, and also learn to critically reflect on them. We started the project with the notion that the great transformation towards a more sustainable urban future requires new visions and maybe also radical visions. But at the same time, we are mostly focused on our small steps, on path dependency, on problems we are solving, and when it comes to crises, of course, even more so. And then sometimes we forget to allow ourselves to dream also of desirable futures. And at the same time, we think that the creation of these new visions should not be just left to so-called experts, whoever they are in designing cities, but they should be co-created with the larger public. So we developed the concept of an extopia, let's say, as a new approach for a democratized way of futuring. And I'm going to explain the concept to you first. And then I picked just a few extopian interventions that we did to just give an example of how we implemented this kind of approach in practice and our learnings from it. And I will conclude with some of an outlook on the outcomes we will have in the project, and also some ideas that we could not finalize or realize in the project, but might be interesting for future research when it comes to future visions in general. So extopia is a concept that has some kind of content on the one side. So the content is using utopian and also dystopian ideas, the way of thinking radically about the future. And we are combining these utopian and dystopian aspects because my utopia could be your dystopia and the other way around. And we think that the focus on the ambivalences between these two is specifically interesting and has a high potential for controversy, but also for dialogue, for different thinking about the future, and to invite people for co-creation. So that's the content side. And then we combine these contents with an adequate format, that we think enables people to actually cognitively assess the future ideas, but not only cognitively, but also feel into the vision. So this is what we want to try to achieve with using different methods, and it can be a huge, a wide range of participatory methods, starting with artistic means like the ones we heard already today. It could be different approaches from education for sustainable development. It could be self-experiments, thought experiments, and all that things. So the methods, they mainly are chosen to kind of irritate and also provoke dialogue. And in our case, because the project is called Urban Exopia, Open Future Spaces, they specifically aim at bringing the discourse to the public space in the city. Yeah, so that's just the summary. We combine some utopian and dystopian ideas, and by the way, they could come from any kind of area of action in sustainable urban development. So the potential is quite high. And in combining these with an adequate format results in an intervention that we are doing. And this is what we actually call the Extopia. It's an intervention. And Tawfik had the nice categories this morning saying that there's spatial, political, and personal interventions. And we ended up focusing on the personal dimensions. But in general, the concept of an extopia is also adequate for more spatially oriented approaches, or maybe even political ones. So in the project, we evaluated all of the interventions that we did in a formative approach using mixed methods, because our aim was to actually learn from them and rework on them to provide final products, as we call it, that will be provided as open access tools for similar projects. And looking on the personal aspect, we are always having educational aims with the interventions we are doing, because we want to train specific future skills, and specifically those that we find important when it comes to creating new future visions. So it's of course fantasy, it's imagination, it's also systemic thinking for the wicked problems, and openness to uncertainty, to ambiguity, and also ambivalences. And also the socially oriented one, the ability to dialogue, to debate differently about the future. And as well, the ability for self-reflection and to reflect on my own visions and how they would affect other people. So, second part, some exemplary extopian interventions. So we started the project in April 2020, which was right in the middle of the first lockdown. And that was actually a problem, because we aimed at doing public interventions involving groups in the public space, and we found that we were not able to plan anything. So instead of starting as we wanted to start, we decided to go into some kind of prototyping phases. And one of the first things we did was a call to creative action, which is something we called the play-space experiment. We did a flyer that invited people to imagine their ideal, playful, open space, because that was exactly the time when the playgrounds were closed, and even you wasn't really invited to use the public park in front of your house. And then we thought it might have maybe even comforting effects to get into that thought experiments. And we distributed a flyer in our personal networks, and many people liked the idea, and there were some teachers who said they would do it. And we didn't do it as a competition. We only asked to hand in ideas, be them written or as drawings or collages or whatever, to put them on a digital Padlet. But in the end, we did receive almost nothing, which was kind of disappointing. And then the second step here was that there was a curator of a festival in Frankfurt am Main in Germany. They were doing a future festival in the Opera of Frankfurt. And she liked the idea for her day of something like she called an idea marathon. And then they took over the flyer and they distributed them in all the media they had in Frankfurt, and even did small wins that were possible. And they received almost nothing. We tried again because the German Museum for Architecture, which is also in Frankfurt, actually planned almost the same approach at the same time, and then we thought we could do that together. And with the partner of the city marketing of Frankfurt, we went into the city center with that stand that you see on the right, and inviting people to just dialogues on what future visions they carry inside of them. And we found that it was very difficult because people came with what they didn't want, and they were starting talking about the status quo, and they were actually really appreciating that we were there and taking part, but there were not many visions that we went away. So, well, the diagnosis that it's quite difficult, and that we might be lacking the ability to actually visualize how we want to live in the future, was in a way confirmed, even though we didn't want that to be confirmed. So that was a prototyping learning. And then we went into designing more complex interventions, like the real Extopians. And I chose one of them. With this one, we defined students of design and students of architecture and planning as the target group for this specific intervention because of their share in designing future cities. And the one part of that intervention was a teaching format. And so I chose it because I thought maybe, because some of you are teaching, maybe it's interesting to see the concept would work in different areas and with different topics as well. So in this case, I did it with a friend of mine who is a design professor in the city of Potsdam, and it's also the connection to Katja here, actually. And we chose the topic of cognitive alternatives to human-nature relations. Maybe you've heard of the concept of a more than human perspective or conviviality and things like that are just appearing in ecological research. So this is the rough topic we chose. And the format was a project seminar in higher education, but a very intense one, I must say. And the projects that resulted were called "Is the End of the World as We Know It," because we were inspired by the REM song, maybe you know it. And we had two different rounds. The first one was in summer 2021, and most of that was only conducted online because of the pandemic. And then in a different city, in the next year, we could do that more in person, and that was my colleagues at the planning department were doing it this time. And there were a lot of inputs for the students, of course, on different aspects of human-nature relations, also the concept of Extopian thinking, and in this case, specifically serious gaming approaches, like as the format that we chose, and also social skills. And we had various exercises that were mainly aiming at training envisioning skills in our students, like a design fiction approach, and also more embodily oriented approaches like forest bathing to reflect on my own relation to nature, etc., and many more. And the aim was not only to train the students in Extopian thinking, but also training them in developing their own Extopian approach and even learn how to evaluate the success of this intervention. So the functional aim was an open-air exhibition that we did with the students, that we conducted as a circuit training, like when you train in different stations, your muscles. We thought of training the imagination muscles, and we aimed at inviting the larger public in different cities to participate in that interactive exhibition. And so the students were forming teams to actually design specific stations for this exhibition. So this is just a summary to show that this was the next Extopia, reciting from the other one, which was the seminar. So that was the circular training that we called the end of human dominance over other species. And we had the possibility to do it in different occasions, like sustainability events, in the participating cities, and also in the opera in the city of Kassel. And that's just a few examples for the stations. They were always asking what if, for example, we could digest our own trash, or if we could plan cities from the perspective of wild animals, or if a hall of city nature was your only access to nature. And then some remarks from the evaluation. So the seminar part was evaluated, for example, using research diaries that you see on the picture with the students, and also survey and more classical forms. And we found that students highly appreciated this different way of thinking about their prospective profession. We got quite positive evaluation results, and we also find some indications of transformative learning, which was like a theoretical background to that seminar. That means a broadening of perspective and reflection on their own roles in sustainable development. The circular training, on the other hand, kind of worked as a concept, because the people we could address were going away with, I think, quite emotional reactions, not always positive, and that was also a difficult side, because we wanted the students to do their intervention, but then, like me focusing more on sustainability communication, it was a bit difficult to see how much intervention I would do to design their way, what they were communicating. So it was a bit complicated. But the people liked it, but unfortunately we were really unlucky with the weather conditions. We talked about the Berlin weather or the German weather before today, and I can just say that I'm not going to plan any open air exhibitions anymore, because it was just really pouring and one day was way too hot. So in the opera it worked really well, but then of course that's also addressing people who would go to a festival in an opera, and not so much the different target groups that we might have wanted to invite. So maybe it wasn't only the weather, but yeah, we don't know. So a second example that I want to briefly show is related to the future of work that we chose on the content side. And we prepared a graffiti workshop that lasted for 3 days in the city of Erfurt, which is in the former east of Germany, in a neglected neighborhood called Wiesenhügel. And initially we wanted to address young adults and the elderly to come together and think of their of the future of their neighborhood, and also of the future of work, because unemployment is quite an issue there. So that was the reason why we chose that topic. And the people who came were mostly children and teenagers, no elderly person, unfortunately. But then my colleagues who did that kind of threw away everything they prepared for that workshop, and they were still having a really nice process with the children who were there over 3 days. What was specifically well was we prepared mood boards. So we, like you see in the middle, we prepared some exemplary imagery on the future of work, and the interaction between the language and between the debates and the pictures were actually the most helpful in inviting them to start thinking of their own future visions. So that was quite working well. And on the last of 3 days, they picked specific images they chose and developed to spray on a huge wall of a gym, and that was actually allowed by the mayor of that district, because we provided the wall, and that might have been one of the big success factors that the young people actually came, because they were enjoying that medium a lot and learning how to spray. And actually there were a lot of interesting processes in that city afterwards related to graffiti, etc. But I can explain that later at some point. Evaluation of this intervention, I already mentioned the mood boards were quite a good tool to start thinking about the future. And well, I already said the use of graffiti was key for the participants who were there, but maybe also it was the reason why elderly people didn't come, because they might have thought it's not a medium for them. And maybe one interesting thing that is relevant for your project is that we just recently started an evaluation with small postcards that we distributed in a restaurant, like you see here, just in front of that huge wall, and asking people very short questions like, what do you see and what do you like, or what would be your interpretation? And I haven't looked at the answers of the people, but my colleague who was there actually said that this was the way the people started thinking about the graffiti, and thinking about wondering where it came from and what it was showing, and showing with their reactions that there might have been, you know, an activating potential through that through that evaluation. So this is something we are going to continue because, yeah, it drove well on a different level. Yeah, and then just one slide on what we are now working on, because the project is ending in the end of June. And one thing that we are going to publish is like a manual or instruction how to design extopian interventions and also how to evaluate them. And we will have a digital toolbox that includes some things we found really helpful, like pictures for mood boards, or something we did in the beginning as a guided visualization that invites people to access the pictures they carry inside of them. Through means of meditation. So we have an audio file for this. And we also have animal cards for the taking over the perspective of a white animal. That was part of a Documenta project last year in Kassel, and things like that. So and some things will be put in English. And the other one, the other product that stays is an extopian intervention I didn't really talk about now because we lost the local level or the city level with it, but we decided that we wanted to work about the future of death. And what we are doing is we bought a ticket dispenser and we reprogramming it to be something for an artifact from the future where you can configure your death in the future and be prepared. And it gives you to-dos, and this is what the thing is actually printing out. And it will be in the museum, in the only museum in Germany dealing with death. So, and there will be a digital twin that we want to put in English as well. Yeah, and then there were unrealized potentials, because in the beginning we also had a very long desk research, and we conducted interviews with change agents to find topics that we liked specifically and that we found adequate to talk about the future, and maybe that would give different visions or ideas than the one that are usually being debated in the media. And some things were, for example, thinking about new future aesthetics, because the aesthetics that we usually see are the renderings from architects with large-scale developments with a lot of greenery, but we thought maybe in a follow-up project we could also think of how the future could look differently, maybe more chaotic, maybe more DIY when it comes to 3D printing, etc., just to give other ideas as to show this is not the way it necessarily needs to become. Or talking about algorithms, about the smart city and what it can do to make the city more inclusive and more just. And one example is to actually slow down the pace of life in the cities, because this is one of the dangers we have with the smart city, that it goes up and up and up, and maybe the traffic light could recognize an elderly woman who wants to make it over to the other side of the street, but she's too slow, etc. So there's examples of thinking algorithms in that way. And yeah, we had also a lot of ideas how the topic of death, and not talking about memorial, but contemporary death, could be more integrated and become more visual in the city, so it becomes a more natural part of our lives in the urban space. Or the urban love reserves, which is based on the notion of a nature reserve area. And 1 or 2 cities in Germany actually have future reserve areas where they specifically decided not to implement any development, to leave it to the future, to wait what could happen there. And then we thought we could also make this love reserve areas to discuss the different ways of love, maybe also love to strangers. It doesn't necessarily mean the interpersonal relationships as we think of them first. So, and there were many other ideas, but maybe next time. Yeah, and maybe just one more slide, which doesn't belong to the Xtopia project, but to another one I was involved in. We had a representative survey in the German population on future visions. So it's representative for people living in cities of at least 50,000 people, and of course it's the German context. So I'm not sure how much it would relate to here. But it was interesting to see what their preferred vision was. And when we asked just spontaneously, it was the greenery. And then we also gave specific future visions that you see here, which also came with a brief definition on these concepts. And also then the urban wilderness was the most popular future vision. And the second one was non-waste city. And the third one was housing for all. And it was interesting, like the sharing city, for example, was the least popular, specifically in the smaller cities and specifically among the elder people. So it's interesting that we apparently have a lot of mental infrastructure related to possession, etc. But yeah, it's also interesting to look at like the young people who actually found car-free cities most important, for example. So yeah, this is the potentials that we might be able to address when we invite people to actually contribute and participate in different projects related to visions. So I want again to thank you for organizing this very wonderful conference, and I want to thank everybody who already had a talk for the inspiration and the learnings I'm taking away. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. It's really amazing. So, something on the ground now. We'll transform to Tarek Nassar, who's an architect and an urban planner. He was born and grew up in Ras El Amud neighborhood in East Jerusalem. And he's a co-founder of Sinsila Center, which is a new model for urban sustainability in East Jerusalem. He worked as a freelance architect and an urban planner, working on several projects in East Jerusalem and others in other areas, focused on placemaking, master plans, and community development. And when I looked to his name and to the center, I realized that I once saw an episode about the bees, and I hope you're going to talk about that, because that's really something special.
Okay, first, thank you, Katja, for inviting me here. I come from the ground. I come from Haredim Muslim version, you know, like the Jewish ultra-Orthodox, but the Muslim version from East Jerusalem. And I was actually, I studied in Stuttgart, like, and I came back 8 years. So when you were talking about Germany, I was like, what I'm doing here? I should go back. But yeah, today we will talk more about hope through actions, because if we keep talking about hope without actions, just you will keep talking, right? Nothing will happen on the ground. So Sinsila model, by the way, Sinsila in Arabic, it means the way to build stones in agricultural terraces. You know, the terrace. So this is in Arabic, it means Sinsila. It has a lot of meaning, to be honest, conceptual meaning. Are you building community? Are you building city? Are you building? Has a lot of multi-dimensional thing. And yeah, this is Jerusalem. unfortunately, I did my thesis about Jerusalem, and in Stuttgart, and it was really hard to know a lot, because it brings you some sadness, and it's not really good to know a lot sometimes. But the good thing about to know a lot is you know how to sneak around in order to find solutions and try to bring hope to the community, human beings, and bees and other species, of course. So this is really the Jerusalem. Jerusalem, it was only the old city with the 4 quarter, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and Armenian. And all other areas around this old city used to be villages with agricultural characteristics, let's say, more or less. And right now this is how it looks outside. It's not villages anymore. It's like in transition between urban and rural, I think, right? And it's hard, really. It's really hard to be. And at the same time, if you look at the other side of Jerusalem, you will see the western side, which is more prototypes. You have public open spaces, and you will see even green elements in the city. Here, if you go back, like really, you cannot see almost few trees. You can count them. So, and at the same time, if you look at Jerusalem, don't try to look a lot, but just look at the stabbing phenomena. The stabbing phenomena in 2014 and 15, when like a Palestinian from East Jerusalem, 14 years old, trying to go and stab an Israeli. I was abroad at that time, and I saw that on social media, and I was like, what's going on? I'm 39 years old. When I used to be really young in Jerusalem, we had really chance to run all over the mountains, and there was a lot of hope. I'm so sorry to say this. It's sad, right? But, well, I don't like really to talk about problems, but I will come to. But I found out when I came back, it's like there is missing hope in the new generation of East Jerusalemites, which is very dangerous. It's more than intifada. It's more than anything. Imagine a human beings living without hope. Doesn't work, right? Actually, hope makes us continuing living. So then I took it on my personal responsibility to act as much as I can. That's why that's why I'm here right now, even I'm talking. So just to voice out, we need to voice out that there is urgent thing. We need to do things. So at the same time, if you see the urban tissue of eastern side and the urban tissue of the western side, you see here like it's more organic tissue, and the other it was like prototype, somebody drawing. And with the missing planning of East Jerusalem neighborhood, there was almost no master planning process from 1907 till 2004 in East Jerusalem neighborhoods. And we're talking about over 50 something years. So the informality and lack of a lot of problems. I'm talking about problems. I don't like it. No trust. This is the main important for me, is no trust, missing hope. So, and usually if you want to do like a development, you will have a long-term master planning process, and good luck with that, believe me. I'm part of big master planning process right now in East Jerusalem with the municipality, and I'm telling you, good luck. With land registration, land ownership issues in East Jerusalem, it will never happen. Who's the investor will come and demolish areas and build areas anew with land ownership problems? So without the flexibility, and I think we're part of the law faculty here. It's your job, guys, really. We need to have the flexibility of land registration. Otherwise, we will never develop East Jerusalem. So master planning, it's a very long term, and good luck with it, believe me. And so maybe medium and short-term interventions, it might work. But imagine if you have hundreds of short-term interventions or medium. You will change the picture, right? As much as you can. So I took the changing spaces and placemaking terminology, which started in New York like a couple of decades, about like changing spaces without life. This is my simple definition. Spaces without life into places full of life. You add share, bring species, right? You put a plant, species comes. You design with its interaction, how to make livable places. Imagine this is an informal area and you just try to add a new layer on it, either horizontal or vertical. Small. You'll change a lot of things. So, and at the same time, you don't have to be stuck with the beautification only as a placemaking, just to do artistic model. No, you can use placemaking and to sneak around. This is here the good thing about sneaking around. You can avoid building permissions if you know how to do things fast. So instead of having 50 square meters shading element, let's put it 49.9, 49.8. You don't have to get a building permission, really. Construction, it's a very small detail that makes a big difference in order to change things on the ground, facts on the grounds. So here it's more like functional rather than only beautification. And if you work on this topic and try to orient the placemaking to be more functional, helping, adding a new layer to those informal areas, it will make a big difference. And imagine if those projects link to each other. You'll have a lot of development thematic concept as well for each area. So I'm just showing few projects, simple, very small, not that much. For example, this project, it was the COVID-19 year, 2020, and I received a call from one of the governmental institutions says that we have 40,000 sheikh left from the COVID-19 year budget. Can we do something in this area? I told them from my eyes, min ayuni, you know what does it mean, min ayuni? Sure. So planning and implementation in 2 months to create 49 square meters shading element and rainwater protection in front of the Al-Mosque. Mosque. It's really the main mosque in Laysawiya. So people, they can pray, they can wait, they can use it. 2 months. Things can be done, but you just need to find a way. And yeah, it's and I had the chance even to run. Imagine, my wife all the time she was like telling me, "What the hell you're doing with schools even?" And bees. I'm coming to bees, by the way, now. And I went to a whole semester with school in Laysawiya every Saturday for 4 months, spending almost 6 hours every Saturday there. Just working with students to understand what they have. In order to come up with a solution, you need to find the community needs, the community sectors. And we did design thinking. It was really hard for them, like just to stay in 5 minutes and to think about solutions. And they built a garden. And then the principal, he was happy because he got a global prize, like something that has to do with sustainability. I didn't agree. I think it's very important to balance between the process and the output. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they care a lot about the output. I do believe that we need to balance. Otherwise, it's not really development. And when you talk about human being development and places and the interaction between those species at the end. Yeah, and the public library in Israel, the only public library, it was a garden around this public library, and we're talking about 450 meters away from the old city. There was no single bench in this land. It's a community garden, how we change it. So what we can do with private, so placemaking, it can be on public, 100%, semi-public, schools, public libraries, and etc. So what, on private level, how we can do placemaking in private level? This is very difficult, believe me. Till 2019, I met Yossi Oud, he's one of the bees expert. He cares about bees. I didn't give a shit about bees. It was a tool for me in the beginning. Then I fall in love with them, really. So my question to Yossi, it was like, how many kilograms you can produce from each hive? How much is it? How much you can sell each? Unemployment rate in women's sector over 80%. They have empty roofs. Imagine if every woman should put hive on her roof, and then bees needs planting, right? So they will start doing planting by themselves. It was a theoretical thing, and I took this slogan, honey and money. So it's not really about environment. I call about the community, women to become a beekeeper as honey and money. It's an economic project for women empowerment. And we received 100 applications in 2 weeks, 2019. And I put even my phone number in the flyer. It was so stupid, I'm so sorry to say it. I just put and I was like, my wife all the time, she was like, why? Everyone's calling you. Why are they calling you? I'm talking to a beekeeper, Tara. Sure, I am. How can I help you? So this is really like, this is the theoretical part. One woman, she will put a hive here, and then the hive will be divided naturally every springtime. So their husbands, they will be proud because they got some honey, and then they will go to their cousins and their uncles and their neighbors. We produce honey. He will never even talk about his wife. Sure, no problem. Then he will be supporting his woman. This is exactly happened, by the way. It happened. And then the neighbor here, she will get jealous and she wants to do some gardening or a beehive, and etc. So this is how we said, okay, maybe now we need to establish a center to inspire people, how they can change the roofs while we're doing this bees course. And here Sinsila Center came as a model. And we created it on the public library, on the second floor of the public library. This is how it used to be, the public library. It was built with the community through courses for a year and a half. So bees, what they need, plant, let's do roof gardening. COVID-19, let's do urban farming course, etc. This is how it looks at night with roof festivals. This is even the room inside, how we built it with the community. This is the first beekeepers in 2019. And the beautiful thing, how to receive those pictures. I just stole those pictures from WhatsApp for fundraising purposes. Hopefully it's ethical. I took it from the WhatsApp that they have between themselves to show how they were competing between themselves, how they're changing the roofs. This is in Kufr Ajab. It's called Kufr Aqab. Actually, I just call it. It's a northern part of the East Jerusalem, outside the separation wall or apartheid wall or security wall. I don't care about the terminology. And it's inside the municipal border, outside the separation wall, inside the municipal border. It's a little bit complicated, Jerusalem. I don't really prefer anyone to go deep inside this topic. I think it's unhealthy even, really.
We have a tour with Iranian tomorrow.
Good luck. Okay, so Sinsila. Now after that, I cannot do placemaking. I cannot do everything. So we need to work with building capacities, job creation, new job, green jobs creation in Israel, which is the future. And last year we created a lot of placemaking. We became the body who's doing even placemaking for the municipality. They don't know how to do it. We know how to do it. And last year we won an innovation proposal from the Ministry of Economy for green jobs as well, and we're teaching new 500 women. We finished 100 this year, another 100. It's a lot of bees. A lot of bees, really. Right now, while I'm talking to you, I think we have around 8 million plus minus a couple of, I don't know, 1,000, but each hive, it's a lot of bees, really. And we produce honey. We established the first woman bee cooperative, urban woman bee cooperative in the world. Urban. It's not a village in one land. It's spread all over East Jerusalem. And we built a financial model for that. I built it, I'm sorry. I don't have budget to hire somebody to do it, so I have to do it and to work on it in order to really still not fixed 100%, but I think it will work. Roof festivals, community. We became the body in Sinsila now who's handling all sustainability and everything that has to do with sustainability and urban agriculture and agriculture in urban areas. We built Sinsila 2 in Abu Tor as well. Different components, different elements. We're building the first workshop space in East Jerusalem. It's an innovation hub for job creation. Yeah, so what are we doing really? We have a lot of multi-dimensional impact at the same time. It's a lot of social, environmental, economic, culture, leadership. It's in one shot. So it was an idea, 2019. I'm still stuck in this sinsila. I hope I will leave so it will be sustainable 100%. I'm not the manager anymore, at least. Idea 60,000 shekel. Last year we reached up to 2.1 million shekel budget of this project. Self-income was 43.5%. 3 years. 2025 we will be 75% self-income. We will stay like this. 25 is just for new ideas and philanthropies, enjoy. We will have a lot of new ideas all the time to develop. So this is what I believe in capacities and giving opportunities. When you hire a new manager from East Jerusalem, 24 years old, to run and to be the general manager of those two centers, this is give opportunities. You need to give him opportunities, work with him. So imagine if we have 100 of those. At the same time, I work as a consultant for the new Tuchnit Chomesh. It's like the 5 years plan right now. I'm building this placemaking as consultant for the government to build East Jerusalem, but to have 400 placemaking projects for the coming 5 years. We're talking about around 49 million shekel budget. And this is the vision. I don't care who owns the city, unfortunately. I just do care about human who's living in the city. So I will stop here. And this is, I believe in it 100%. We do need hope, but the one thing we need more than hope is action. Because once you have action, hope will follow. Otherwise, just bullshit. I'm sorry. You have a video. I have a lot of. But I come from the ground. I love working with the community, for the community. So, thank you.
I think it's unfair for everyone else having presenting such a wonderful project. Really amazing. Nevertheless, Ido will have to bear his burden of being the next. So Ido Bruno is a professor of industrial design at the Bezalel Academy, who was once here on this mountain, but not anymore. Academy of Art and Design. His works and exhibition have been presented at the most esteemed museums, such as the MoMA and others. He has been the recipient of numerous awards and prizes, and he has also been, for 5 years term, the director of the Israeli Museum, which is arguably the leading cultural institution in Israel. However, I think today he'll discuss something less formal and less institution. So let us hear your current project, please.
So, hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you for having me. I think this is my first presentation ever to a faculty of law. And also, I'm usually on that side of discussing the future. I'm a designer. What we deal with is looking at an empty space and saying something will grow here. But today I'm here more in the, I would say, the category of newsmaking, or I would say a civilian spectator at a forum of protest, which is really sort of raises an interesting question, what the relationship is between protests and futuring or future making. So, because when we are protesting, we're just saying no, right? And Tarek just mentioned we need to do something, we need action. So what is the relationship? I think it's a nice question for us. My presentation is, I see it, okay. Are we good? Yeah. By the way, if you turn down the light a little bit, we get better colors. This is a visual presentation. Could we do that? Maybe only the lights here. Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm here today, by the way, just a short opening remark. This action, which happened about a month ago, this is the reason why I was invited. Thank you for inviting me. It's all very sort of new, and it's still under legal investigation. I'm not sarcastic, it's serious. So I will discuss it in a sort of a general way and try to avoid relating to specific people and people who are, I mean, I should have given credit here to a lot of people, but I won't. So what I want to do very briefly is describe the way this action, which involved the painting of a very long line, a 2.4 kilometer line in the streets of Jerusalem. So it's an urban scale line painted across Jerusalem one morning on the 16th of March. What led to that action? How it came about? So really it all began about 2-3 months ago when all the sort of the onslaught on the legal system in Israel began, and there was a feeling with some designers and artists and architects, some of the members of the creative community, that the connection between what is happening in the, I'd say, in the governmental judicial system is not apparent, is not clear to the people who are involved in creating things and doing art and design and architecture. So it's obscure to them, whether because they don't want to know the connection or they're just oblivious to it or they're self-centered. That happens a lot with artists. And so the idea was to visualize this connection. Okay, this is the real root of this action. And it began with this. It's a Google map. It's a search for a connection between two symbols, one symbolizing the onslaught on the judicial system, the Supreme Court, and its neighbors, the Knesset and the government and the Knesset on one side, and then on the other side, the new Bezalel Academy building. Bezalel Academy of Art and Design is the oldest institution for art and design in Israel. It was the brainchild of an utopian, by the way, if we're discussing utopias, 114 years ago. Boris Schatz, he came to Jerusalem, he said, I want to establish a place where people can dream about art and design and architecture and craft, do something new and positive. And Bezalel just moved from being a neighbor of the Hebrew University to the center of the city, and it was a good symbol of what the cultural institutions in general and the creative community in general could be. So there's a line drawn between these two spheres as more as symbols than actual institutions. And that line, when you do a Google search, which is what I did, or somebody did anyway, is 2,400 meters long. Okay, walking distance, and takes 32 minutes, according to Google, to walk that distance. And that became a source of inspiration to some people, and created the initial project, which was called 100 meters per hour. And basically it was a 24-hour cultural event, like a festival, if you like, inviting creative people to suggest cultural acts. This could be dance and theater and film and plastic arts, but also literature and poetry, other performing arts, to move along at this line at the average rate of about 100 meters per hour during 24 hours in a way that could, I would say, express the diversity of different types of protests that were appearing on the streets at the time. Because one of the interesting phenomena of this whole battle, I would say, that's happening is that different types of people, different groups, people with different visions and different futures, if you like, came together to do this battle. And some of them didn't feel very comfortable to be with each other, next to each other. So the idea was to create a format which would allow these people to come together, maybe even have a dialogue, maybe discuss their different visions for the future, but also separate themselves if they want to. So because you have 24 hours and you have 2,400 meters, you could allocate different places and different times of the night and day to do your thing. And you could rub shoulders, if you like, with people who are more similar to you or people who are very different to you. You can choose. That became a very interesting idea, but it's a big project and it takes time. It takes a long time. So what we did is we created a marathon at the end of February, and we invited people who are creative people from all these communities, not only from the Bezalel Academy, from many other places, to suggest ideas for this event. And we were overwhelmed by the number of people interested. You should know that these type of people and these communities are not used to working together. They don't come together. They do their own thing. They work maybe in small groups and most of the time individually. So we had hundreds of proposals. This happened in 3 days. Okay, this is the rate of things was the rate of the protest, not the rate of cultural event programming. Hundreds of proposals. We had more than 100 people come at night to Jerusalem. You shouldn't, for those of you who don't know Jerusalem, people from outside Jerusalem, they don't have to be from Stuttgart or from New York. They could be from Tel Aviv. When they land in Jerusalem after dark, they think that something bad will happen to them on the way from the train station to the center of the city. And they need, and sometimes it does, actually. So more than 100 people came, and they were not Jerusalemites, or some of them were, but a lot of them weren't. And they sat together. This was the graphic for the event, so you see the line. And actually what you see is a combination, like an overlay of a timeline and a map. Okay, so the program for this 24-hour event was this mixture of a timeline and a map. And they sat together. They're blurred for obvious reasons. And they sat together, and what they did, they didn't talk about protest. They planned very concrete actions that they would like to do on a timeline and in different places along this 2,400-meter line. And this is what it looked like. So we did planning, okay, actual planning. And if we don't have the time. If we go into it, there are many hundreds of ideas or dozens of ideas, very beautiful ideas. Some are small, some are large, some are very dramatic, some are very like chamber music. They're very delicate, very beautiful. And we were sort of moving ahead with this idea, but the protest evolved, and things were happening, and suddenly the timeline didn't seem right. And also things were opening up, and more creative people were actually showing their things in the protest. So we said there was a feeling that maybe this type of action is not right for this time. It will take a long time to produce. There's not enough, how would I say, attentiveness for this type of activity. It's a time for things which I would say are more shallow, more blunt maybe, more dramatic, easier to understand immediately, and better directed at the wider public. And so this idea is still in the drawer and still evolving very slowly, but it evolved into this action of the 16th of March, which is a completely different type of. It's along the same line. It has some of the same similar characteristics, but it's completely different. And it deals with these questions, which I think are some of the. I'm really sorry that I couldn't participate in the whole conference, because I think I missed some of the interesting answers or interesting questions that have to deal with this. But when I say we, I mean designers and artists, when we ask these questions, they're slightly different. So it's not who legally owns the city or who has the legal right to the city, but rather who gives the city its character. Okay, who gives it its color, its texture? Okay, who gives it a meaning, or what types of meanings do we project on our cities? And an action like this, which is a very short and as I say, shallow in my mind action, comes into a sort of a dialogue with these questions, which are much deeper, because Jerusalem especially, it's an 8,000-year-old city. It has so many layers, so many meanings, so many textures, so many pieces of history. So what are we looking at? So one of the basic things is that a city is never a white canvas. It's got a lot of color and texture and materials in it. And when you design something like this, it needs to go into this context. And in some places it works with it, and sometimes it works against it. It's a very interesting design question, even if it's temporary. And you can see how it interacts with different textures. Cities are designed by professionals and are given formal endorsements by different types of institutions or governmental agencies. So in this case, you can see that this line that was drawn one early morning sits on a line drawn by an architect, city planners, and approved by the city, by the local government, okay, by the municipality. And it goes along that line. It works with it in some cases. Another type of relationship, which I particularly like, is that the city has other lines, like in this case, the light rail line. And you can see the light rail moving in one direction as the workers, laborers, if you like, are working. You can see them here. They're working away, painting the line. And sometimes the intersections, sometimes these things work in parallel, sometimes they will intersect. But the intersection is not necessarily contradictory. Rather, I think it enhances. Also, it's a nice sort of a fun fact is that this light rail line is actually the red line. Okay. Then you have other places. This is the end of the line. Okay, the target of the line is the entrance to the Supreme Court. You can see the building of the Supreme Court right there. And this is a small square, very Jerusalemite in its choice of materials. It's dedicated to Agranat, the Judge Agranat, one of the founders of the Supreme Court. And so you have a completely different type of interaction that looks like that. And it's interesting in its own way. It also raises some ethical questions that have to do with graffiti. I don't know if you know, but in the graffiti ethics, you don't paint over natural stone. You do concrete, you do asphalt, you do different types of rendering, but you don't paint over natural stone. It's not done. Here it's done. But the paint was actually designed to be washable, not only for this reason, for other reasons as well. So there's an interesting twist. This is what it looks like from above, and this is the only place along this line where there was text. And what it says, maybe you can't read the English, it says drawing the line, which was the name of this project. And there was a very focused choice not to use text in any other place other than this one, to create an abstract image rather than produce text. And a lot of the responses to this, and there were really hundreds, maybe more than hundreds of responses to this project, public responses and private responses of different types from different communities, all of them, most of them related to the fact that it was abstract rather than textual or verbal, which is interesting. So people were a little bit tired from words because there was a lot of words in the protest. And then suddenly there's an image which is almost devoid of words. It's quite interesting. Okay, so I'm nearing the end of my presentation. Just 3 meanings that I sort of pulled out from the different meanings that people gave this line. Things that people thought this line meant. By the way, the police, when they investigated me, were very much curious about the meaning of this action, which I, of course, said, I have no idea. And they said, well, you're a design professor, you should know. And I said, well, maybe they just want to make the city beautiful. Okay. So there's the thin red line, which is, you know, its origins are in the Crimean War, so it's about, 170 years old, which basically deals with the question, where do we stop? I like it in particular because it's different from a wall or a barrier. Tarek mentioned the separation wall or the apartheid wall. A red line is something you can cross, but it requires you to ask yourself whether you want to cross it or not, and it goes together with the slippery slope. We know that. There are 2 sort of things that work together. And if you deal with them, they require you to personally decide where you stand. And you can cross the line, you can stop before the line, you can draw the line for someone else, or you can draw it for yourself. So I think it's a nice place to look at this, and this is what it looks like, you know, if you come across it in the city. Then there's the line to visualize obscure connections. This was the source of this whole project, showing that there's a connection. It's a rather, I'd say it's a rather simple, maybe simplistic idea even, saying, okay, we have A and we have B, and now I'm going to draw a line for you to connect them and show you that they are connected. But actually, we need that. Not other people need that. We all need that. Sometimes we need someone to show us that this is connected to that. So this line, this is what it does, and it's on an urban scale. It's nice. It's big. It's colorful. You can walk along it. You can look at the drone footage and enjoy it. So there's something about that. This is a view of the Supreme Court, by the way. How it comes around here and goes to the entrance of the Supreme Court. I apologize. This is the center of the city. This is the pedestrian street, Ben Yehuda, pedestrian street. Right in the center, Kikar Tzion. It's an important square in the center of Jerusalem. A lot of different things happened there. A very famous bombing was there. A very famous demonstration was there of the extreme right wing. And many other things happened there. So it's nice. For technical reasons, I don't have the other side, which is the way it reaches to the Betzalel building, which is right next to the police station and the courthouses and all that. Okay. And the third is the question of a visual icon to connect with or identify with, which is something that is rarely something that you can create in advance. So you hope that something will become a symbol or an icon, but you don't know. But apparently in this case, at least for some people, it caused a very emotional response, a very strong response, and it's very beautiful, it's very colorful. There was a lot of thought investment in the color itself, the combination of color, the proportions, even the choreography, the movement of the workers, what they wear, what sort of equipment they use. All this was quite premeditated, both technically but also in the design sense. It all happened very quickly. It took about 10 days from the beginning of the planning to the execution. So things can be done, like Tarek said, if you're really effort. It's a lot of effort with many people involved. But it has something, and people responded to that. And I want to finish by showing this. These are renderings. These are imagings. They're not photographs. There was a group of people, a number of people, who came back and said, we want to make an icon of this and use it as part of a wider protest or a wider battle for the freedom of the cultural institutions and the creative communities. And these are some of the ideas that came up to do these welcome mats. What you have on the left-hand side is the Israel Museum, and on the right-hand side is the Tel Aviv Museum. So these as if this line comes to these cultural institutions and connects them all in one web, which resists what is going on. And then there's the use of the facades and also a label, maybe like a war medal or something like that. These things are now sort of sprouting with a number of different people, maybe as a possible future action. It's all very new. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I want to tell you a fun fact. Tarek's project and Ido's projects are both in Jerusalem. So I think it's really interesting to think about the correlations here. So let us now hear the last project by the parents of this conference, Tim and Katya. No further introduction is needed. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. It's not much, but it's something. That remark earlier by Michal really struck a chord with me. And sometimes we've got all these big ideas which are too big and amount to nothing. And when we started out, we had bigger ideas as well, and people told us that can't be done. And I thought, possibly it can't be done. And Katya told me, well, let's see if it can be done. And we started, and we'd like to now connect Ido's presentation with our own project. This was initially born out of the idea that graffiti should be allowed. We imagined cities to be freely shaped by the residents, in a sharp contrast to today's closely policed urban landscapes, as we've just seen. We wanted to conduct a real-life experiment implementing this idea, but because of current legal restrictions, an experiment allowing graffiti is pretty much impossible. So we looked for alternative ways to let people design their city until we were able to conduct this experiment we're going to present now. It took place last year in Berlin. The background for this experiment is our concern with several interrelated phenomena. The first one is democratic deficit, resulting from polarization of public discourse and the inability of political rivals to communicate with each other. Scholars have suggested different measures of mending democracy and restoring a common basis for social communication. Some of these proposals advocate democratic deliberation, small groups that use rational argumentation to achieve greater understanding on various political issues. Other proposals go into the opposite direction, noting that social discourse is already oversaturated with politics and suggesting that we should try to move away from this highly polarized field. In this way, people will stop perceiving their co-citizens in terms of their political affiliation and instead start regarding them as people with valuable aspirations that lie beyond politics. I think this is an important point. We wanted to go one step further and try to democratize the very question of what should belong into public discourse. Today, people participate in public discourse mainly as a part of a group, for example, at demonstrations or on social media that encloses people in filter bubbles, or indirectly when their political representatives speak for them. We thought that this collective dimension of public discourse might be the main factor that shapes it in a polarizing way. You're either on my team or you're not. And that's why we wanted to see what would happen if people were given an opportunity to take part in public discourse on an individual basis. What kind of topics would they bring in? And how much politics would we see? The second concern that stood behind our experiment is the anonymity of public space. Although these spaces are understood to belong to the public, practically they are shaped by a small number of entities, most notably by commercial enterprises. City residents, however, those who actually inhabit these spaces, they remain largely invisible. And we imagined a multi-voiced city whose residents would be able to add their visible contributions to the fabric of urban semantics. And at this point, our project connects to the idea of the right of the city, something that's been talked about a lot, even today. And it's a much discussed, but nevertheless notably vague concept. And our proposal is an attempt to fill it with a more specific content. The idea was to see what would happen if people were given an opportunity to co-design the city with their personal contributions. So, combining these two ideas, individual speech and an opportunity to co-design the city, we got the following concept. Let us explore what happens if people are given an option to place individual expressions in urban public spaces. And that was easier said than done, to be honest. And we just tried to make it work, looking for ways, until we got quite fortunate and got the sponsorship of Val GmbH, an advertising company. And they kindly agreed to provide 1,500 places on billboards in Berlin for us to use. So we named the project Du bist am Zug, which is German for It's Your Turn. And then we built a website and asked people in Berlin to submit their contributions, which could be either text or images. And I think Katja will take over now.
Okay, so now let us present some of our results. Just briefly, so we received 771 contributions. The submission period was only 6 weeks because of different reasons it was so short. But we have a feeling that receiving so many contributions in such a short period is quite substantial, and it can serve as a proof that the opportunity to place individual expressions in public space does meet a significant social demand. So who took part in the project? We had twice as many women as men, about 2/3 were women and 3% were of diverse people of diverse gender. We do not have a clear explanation why more women than men participated, but we do not think this should be a problem. In terms of age, we had participants from 18, which was a minimal participation age because of legal restrictions, until and up to 77. And as you can see, it was more or less evenly spread between the different age groups. Only towards the end, it decreases a bit towards the older age. And also people submitted in the names of their children, so practically we had from the age of 0 to 77. So in terms of origin, please excuse my German. It will be, some of the slides will be in German because we just put the answers that we received and asked the machine to combine them together. So most people were from Berlin, born in Berlin, about and a further significant number in other German cities, but we also had people from other places such as Ukraine, Russia, Austria, France, Italy, Moldova, the US, UK, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Afghanistan, China, Vietnam, Turkey, Israel, Palestine, Syria, and Rwanda. Okay, in terms of occupation, about 20% of the participants indicated professions that have something to do with creativity, such as photographers, artists, designers, illustrators, and poets. But apart from these various artists, we did have people from a wide range of professions, physicians, school teachers, salespersons, scientists, university professors, students, managers, engineers, waiters, as well as retired and unemployed persons. We believe that this diverse group of participants in terms of age, origin, and profession was actually due to the format that we eventually chose, or we were compelled to choose, the format we had anyway. The very simple format of uploading an image or typing in a text doesn't require much effort, doesn't require many skills. So it allowed a wide range of people to participate, unlike if we had our initial idea of allowing graffiti, which would perhaps confine the group, as Yasmin's project really might indicate. It would probably signal that it is something for young creative people, and probably we will not have retired people and physicians, and we won't have this a very diverse participants group. So what did people share? The most interesting question. So first, in terms of format, our website very simply allowed to use either images or texts. And a small minority of people, 15%, chose the text option. About 85% chose images, but some images also contain texts. So a picture which also had some words. These were 16%. So if you look at this chart, then you will see the 68%, the largest part, are images without any text, just images. So we think this finding is interesting. Given the freedom to express themselves freely in public, an absolute majority of people chose images over texts, and most gave up words altogether. So This gives a sense of how social discourse might look, maybe, if more space were given to individual speech. Maybe we would see less verbal discussions and more visual exchange. Okay, so as for the contributions themselves, we received a very broad and colorful variety of very different contributions from all kinds. And we used text and image analysis to analyze them, to categorize them. So no digitalized methods applied, because the number was manageable, so we decided just to analyze them ourselves. So now let us present only the three largest categories that we identified. The first, and by far the largest category, 2/3 of all the contributions, even a little bit more. These were contributions showing the creativity of the participants. Various paintings, drawings, collages in, here they are, in various techniques. We also had art installations, digital works, sculptures, textile design, a self-made costume, poems, again, sorry for the German, these are poems, and pictures showing the participants dancing, playing music, and singing. So this also gives a sense of how the social discourse might look if we gave space, more space for individual speech. We can very cautiously assume that its maybe central or at least very prominent topic would be art of various kind. So this finding also lends support to voices advocating cultural democracy, an order in which each would, an ideal order, utopian order, in which each person would get a chance to be a co-creator rather than a mere consumer of culture. So each of us would be able to, if we want, of course, to contribute something to our shared culture and art. So indeed, many people want, our project indicates that many people want to share their creativity with others. And this begs the question, which Ido might want to answer, why such a small number of people gets the chance to be called artists and most importantly to put their artworks for all of us to see and enjoy, while others do not get this chance and have to preserve their creativity for themselves. So the next category was political messages. It was a much smaller group than the previous one, than the first one, creativity. It was about 25% of all messages, of all contributions. So just very briefly, the topics. Messages promoted equality, many of them, generally, and for specific groups such as women or LGB people or also overweight people. We had many contributions calling to stop the war in Ukraine. Of course, it is period sensitive. We do not expect this finding to repeat itself after the war will be over soon. And also just other contributions generally to calling to stop wars and promoting peace. We also had something interesting about this project. We had a significant number of contributions dedicated to an illness called ME/CFS, which I guess you have never heard about. It is really not widely known and arguably needs more attention, which we think this might be an indication that if we open up the social discourse for individual speech, we might see topics that are currently ignored and not discussed at all. So another prominent topic was environmental protection and animal rights. Sorry, it's all in German. You just have to believe me if you do not understand it. And the third and the last group we want to show is contributions that allow glimpses into the personal worlds of the participants. It is a slightly smaller group than the previous one of the political messages, 23%, 2% less. People send, for example, pictures of themselves alone or together with family and friends, pets, and of course just pictures of their pets, a great number of them. People have cute pets. We also have had many personal messages. Ah, you understand German, I see. It's very good. Alon studies German. We had many personal messages directed at a specific person. For example, 2 marriage proposals. This is one of them, Laube, will you marry me? We had a poem dedicated to a deceased grandmother, a message of support to a sick daughter of the participant. We had many artworks of the participants' children. For example, this one, which you're already really familiar with, and in a strange way, it connects to what Ido was talking about visually. But actually, it is the word mama, which a disabled child, 10 years old, wrote in his favorite color, and his mother shared her impression that they were really proud to see his work in public space. So, all in all, we think that our findings suggest a very different picture of the social discourse than the one we witnessed today. A relatively modest place is dedicated to politics, and an absolute majority of contributions do not have any statement to agree or disagree with. What can you argue against a picture of a cat? You're a dog person? I thought we were friends. So indeed, most people, when given the opportunity to express themselves in public, to share whatever they want, of course in legal frameworks, not hate speech or something like that, they did not choose something that indicates their belonging. So just some last results we want to share. Of course, we cannot share them all. We asked the participants about their motivation for taking part in the project, and the most frequent answer was something like what you see here. It was a chance to design the city together, to take back the space that actually belongs to us or should belong to us, to democratize it. And some people said specifically, we want to replace the ugly advertising or the annoying advertising with something meaningful, beautiful, some poetry, some art. And we think this might suggest that actually what our tool, what we propose, could indeed fill this vague concept of the right to the city, so much spoken today, with some content, because people really felt that in this way, in adding their contributions to the public space, they had a chance to claim their ownership over the space, to claim it back or just to claim their presence. And another curious finding was that people said that the presence was important and not the reactions. Only 2 of the participants said we actually were expecting reactions. But most people said what was most important for me is to see my picture printed in large in public space. I wanted everyone to see me. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be seen and heard, to show my art, my poetry, myself, my creativity. So indeed, the medium we chose did not really allow immediate reactions, only on the social media. And we still don't know if it was a drawback or a benefit. Because if you think of it, there is something powerful about the ability to share something, to send a message without getting an immediate reaction, without any disturbance. For example, think of television, radio, press. All the media, all the traditional media work just in this way. You send your message without getting reactions. And also traditional art, more traditional forms of art, like a concert, an exhibition, a show, a performance. Of course, there are exceptions today, especially, but usually they are non-interactive. It is only about the artists that want to convey their message, and the public has to attend. And if we look at it from the other side, it is also often more to be learned from listening, than from talking. So we also think this was an opportunity for other people to reflect upon things, upon these personal contributions, to attend to them without the possibility of an immediate reaction, without having to or having the ability to interact instantly. And this is indeed different from our initial idea of allowing graffiti. If you are familiar with legal walls where graffiti is allowed, you might know that all the messages there overlap, they are destroyed, they are answered to, modified, they are written over, and this might be a drawback in not being able to send the message and for it to stay and kind of clean message without any noise in between around it. But of course, reactions could also be interesting. So we do look for ways to conduct our project again, perhaps with some modifications that would allow reactions. Just a second.
Just a few final words, I'm sorry. Because there's one question which hasn't been answered yet, and I'm assuming some of you have thought about that. What about hate speech? If you go on Facebook, if you go on Twitter, communication there can sometimes be hard to bear. And when we were discussing what we wanted to do with people, hate speech was one of the main arguments why people told us, oh, you shouldn't do that and you can't do that. And we had no idea. We were quite optimistic, but it hadn't been done before, so we simply didn't know. And surprisingly, people were happy to share their cats, to share photos, to share all sorts of things, but hate really wasn't an issue. And I think if you give somebody the opportunity to put up something in a prominent space and sign it with their name, they'll do something they're proud of. And I think this is what happened. And I'm really proud that we were able to give all these people space in Berlin to show what they wanted to share. And that's it for today, from me anyway. Thank you.
Let me please invite our panelists to sit with us. This was really amazing. Really one of the most wonderful events I've ever had in an academic environment. And the fact that it is as a part of an academic environment is something that is so interesting. before I'll open to questions and comments, let me just point at maybe 3 points, 3 or 4, that I thought that might be interactive for all of you. So just keep them in mind if you want to further refer to them once you give once you answer the questions asked by others. The first is there is something that is grassrooted and something that is from top down in all of your works. It's a matter of scalability. So in some scales, it's a bottom-up process. Stark, yours example is clearly such. However, I'm not sure if Ido's project is something that should be identified as from below, in the sense that there was some organization, I won't spell, behind it, in the sense that there is an organized community. However, it is still only an informal community. So I wondered to what extent you think of this formality, informality, top-down, grassrooted, as part of the essence of the projects that you are part of. Of course, what Ido didn't mention is that the day after, the line was deleted by the city. The same day. So because the people worked overnight. And so, in fact, the same day, and however, Tarek's project is lasting for years now. So there is also something about temporality here, and what's the essence of things that they last, that are experiments, that are just one-timers, and so. Also, I was wondering whether you have some thoughts about how the participants in your projects further interact following the event or events. So you mentioned a WhatsApp group of the BE women, and so I wonder whether you two have some thoughts about how it was a part of a community building process, maybe not. And lastly, to what extent do you think that the places where your project took part in have changed due to your participation, due to your projects, or not? And was it even ever a goal? So these are my comments. Because of our limited time, I will let you refer to them as much as you want. After we'll hear some more questions. Yes, Alon. Just if you can take the mic, please. No, there's another one.
Two quick questions. One to Ido. I wonder what the red line, it wasn't red, it was red and kind of pink. What it meant, looked like a Mark Rothko kind of. I wonder whether there was a kind of symbolic element. And a question to Katya and team, I guess. I wonder to what extent other forms of media could be used. For instance, you could think about people putting their music in public, or their kind of voices. So in a way, it was democratizing, but it gave prominent power to those who are interested in paintings or text or visual things, rather than other forms or other ways of doing it. And the other thing is that I think there is something, and I actually was in the Museum of Graffiti in Berlin, yeah? And the one thing that really disturbed me is the idea of civilizing graffiti. And I wonder whether you thought about, I mean, there's something, underground, illegal, immoral, we do this. And you kind of civilize it. And there is something problematic about it. I want it to remain edgy. Yeah, thanks.
Are you comfortable with us taking one or two more questions before we answer? Yeah. So yes, Merav and Talia and Michal and the gentleman in the back.
Thanks for all presentations. They're actually all very much connected to my research. But I will have only one quick question for Tim and Katja. And you showed the results of your research, which are very interesting. But I was wondering whether the city or the format already censor the comments you got. So basically, people know what is out there in the public sphere, and they are already kind of disciplined to send the same reactions. They know they censor themselves because they know what will. I mean, they think other like hate speech, for instance, will just not be picked and stuff like this. So in this regard, I'm not sure. Like, it's a beautiful project and a beautiful conclusion that if we would let people do it, that's what they will do. But I would also argue that maybe people are already disciplined to think in a very specific way about the public sphere and about what we are expecting them to send and to present in the public sphere. And that's what they actually send us, especially when it's billboards. Okay, so when it's like under commercial kind of disguise, or that's how people see it.
Okay. Yeah, Talia, and we'll take a stop after that.
Yeah, I could ask many questions about the Berlin project, but since I'm in Jerusalem, I want to ask something about the bees. I think it's an absolutely fascinating idea to take jealousy as the central emotion to work out making people plant flowers just so that they're better than those of the neighbors and the bees come to your garden instead of to the neighbor's garden. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I like it so much because it moves away from this, oh, let's make something nice together. You know, it's actually an economic activity that produces all this niceness. So I'm really impressed with that, especially because I did a project in a research project, not an activist project, a research project in the US once where there was a housing project where white middle-class people tried to come and garden, and that paper is called Gardening with a Little Help of My Middle-Class Friends, but it never worked because people didn't want to get their nails dirty. Why plant flowers? And it's just because they forgot the bees, right? So had they thought about this as a bee project, so I think I just wanted to say that I really, really like that, but I have a question, and that is, it's also very gendered. It's for women. And I wonder, when you started to talk about hopelessness, I wondered about the man, and I don't know how to formulate this in a clear question. But what I'm seeing from community activism that we do with the most, or that activists do and we observe with the most deprived communities in Berlin, it's usually easier to get the women to do, because for various reasons. And I wonder how you reflect on that, or yeah, that's the question.
Okay, so let us take 2-3 minutes each. We'll have more questions later, okay, in the second round. So, Katja, let's start with you. Just if you can keep it in 2-3 minutes per person.
Okay, thank you for these questions. First, I will briefly address what Ronit asked about building a community and the interactions between the participants. Some indeed told us that they joined an online community that was created because of the project, while people were looking for the posters. And many told us that they didn't directly interact, but they felt the sense of community because they felt the other in the public space, and they were seen to the other. So, other forms of media alone. A wonderful idea. I also thought about it, for example, having like boxes that you can press and hear different voices from the city. You know, in museums sometimes you have things like that. I think it's a wonderful idea, and we should work towards it.
Do you want to sing to us?
Sure, I maybe speak.
Paint for you.
You can speak German to us. The second, Alon's second question about
domesticating graffiti, to me, it is a problem, and I see your point. And I think the way we shifted our idea was a good idea. We learned from graffiti that people want to be seen. The basic message of graffiti is, I am alive, and you should know about that. And we learned from Yasmin that elderly people are not very likely to pick up a spray can. So I think we found a good way to involve as many people from as many age groups and backgrounds as we possibly could. And so in this way, the use of billboards and contributing through a website was the better idea. And as a photographer, I prefer documenting illegal graffiti. For one, it often disappears quickly, and so if you don't have a good photo, it's kind of like it never happened. Then I admire, and that's not just graffiti and illegal things, but I admire people who do things which present no financial gain whatsoever, who've got some kind of intrinsic motivation to do whatever they do because they believe in doing that. And yeah, that is especially to be seen in illegal graffiti. And I think now I need to drink some water and pass on the mic.
Thank you. So the last question about self-discipline. Yes, I think I will give you a lawyer's answer, okay? Just for now. I do believe in laws that regulate speech. I do think that hate speech should not be allowed. It is not allowed on social media either. That you cannot use hate speech. It is just not filtered so quickly. But it is the same laws apply, and it should not be there. So if people discipline themselves, this is how it works, it's okay with me. I think that these are the borderlines that should exist. You wanted to add something?
Just very quickly, I think you're also right about the medium, which kind of shapes the message people will send. And that is basically comes to new ideas. If you think of the first cars, they looked like horse carriages because that is what people knew. And they just took away the horse and added a motor. So when you see a billboard, you kind of know the framework in which to operate. And in that way, I think the medium shaped the message.
Maybe just a small remark regarding what you just related to, which I think is very important. In my world, it's known as affordance, and it's the trait of materials and formats and textures and colors to suggest what to do with them. And one of the most interesting researches I read many years ago about it had to do with vandalism, which is relevant to our discussion. And it showed how different urban elements suggest the way to vandalize them. So if it's glass, it will be shattered. If it's wood, it will be burnt or carved. If it's stone, it will be graffitied, etc. And so you can actually work with the materials and the formats in order to guide very gently people to do different things. It's not a manipulation. I don't think it's an evil manipulation. It's just sort of offering different types of response. And if you move from visual to audio, for example, you will get completely different things. So it's actually, this is a fantastic research that you've just started on, embarked on the difference between the video and the audio, or the visual and the audio. Regarding the other questions, there's actually a huge question that you sort of dropped during your talk about the question who becomes formally an artist and how we as society look at artists. This is nothing that the scope of this conference can really hold, but I will say that in my mind, our default is being creative. Every one of us is very creative. It's not a romantic thing, it's just the way we are. We invent things all the time. And from time to time, they're useful. It's rare, by the way. A lot of what we invent or create is junk. All of us, artists as well, by the way. So if you look at the over of artists, of their life work or whatever, a lot of it is not so good, okay? But what they can do or may do sometimes, and sometimes the curators do that, is that they select. They pick and select and choose and refine and do that. And I think maybe some of the people here know this from their academic work as well. You don't publish everything. You do this thing where you want to refine things and make them better. So everything, okay. Okay, so I mean, we could go on about this. I'd just say that when I teach design to students, I show them things that my daughters created when they were very small, and show them how, not because they were my daughters, just because they were children close to me that I could actually observe every day and see how creativity bubbles and pops up in different places, and it's very widespread. And then the question is, what do you do with it? And on the other end, you have this, I'd say this guild, okay, of artists and curators and museums, and they decide who's an artist or not, and that's a cultural thing. It's a thing that has to do with fashion and politics of the art world and all sorts of things like that. It has nothing to do with the question of how creative or how artistic people are. Okay. Going to your question about bottom up and top down, and also the temporary and the permanent. I mean, this case study that I show really is designed to be very temporary. Actually, there's a strong emphasis on being temporary, especially through the special development of the paint. If you try and go and shop for temporary paint, it's very difficult. Paint is designed to hold. So you have to develop it to be temporary, and you have to do some testing and work with some chemistry to actually do that. But it's part of the message. The message is, we're not changing the city now. We're not about putting a stamp for posterity of our art in the city. It's not that important. Actually, it's downplaying a little bit the importance of art in permanence, and sort of emphasizing I'd say the potential of an artistic action to provoke, to inspire, to create movement. It's by far more important than the permanence of the artwork in this case. What Tarek is doing is completely different. He's giving hope, long-term visionary hope to people who can provide for themselves, who can make their environment more pleasant, who create better interactions with their neighbors or with their life partners. So it's a completely different thing. And then maybe I'll stop here because there's a lot of more to say. Just one thing about the color. You asked why the choice of colors. Yeah, the color, it's red, pink, red. Okay, so it's 2 parts pink, 2 parts red, but the red outlines the pink. And actually, it's an abstract choice. So it doesn't have the type of meaning that you may be searching for is a symbolism. Okay, maybe the pink has to do, I don't know, with some political movement or something. No, it's nothing about that. It's an abstract choice for something to be very recognizable, to work well with the city. That's very difficult. If you look at the photographs, you'll see there's a lot of red and yellow and white and black and gray. And if you want to stick out, you have to work with these colors in a particular way. So it's a very premeditated. There were a lot of different sketches. There were a lot of different ideas for this until that particular choice. And the main reason was it to be recognizable, to stick out in the urban environment, to be memorable, and also to slightly relate to a number of references, some of which I mentioned today, like the Red Line, but a lot of them have to do with design and art, and I'm not, we could go on about this. So there's a lot of references to art history, for example, but it's not so important.
Okay. I will start with Ronit, I think. Is it bottom up or up? Like top, bottom? It's both. Otherwise, we will never be sustainable. So this is very important. Like you take an idea and you work on it and you market and you tell a story and then you go to the level up and show them it works. It works. You have to sell it, and then you. This is how it goes. Otherwise, you will not be sustainable. And at the same time, thinking about job creation and employment within any, I don't know if it's an intervention or it's an activist, or it's really like there is no definition for it right now. What we're doing, we're just adding a layer with the human beings, and from the top and sometimes here, and it's a matching between all that. Yeah, it's a dancing, to be honest. You have to be a dancer here, unfortunately. Why it's sustainable? Because you have just to link it to economic. Because I remember one day, actually, an architect, an Israeli Jew architect, a friend of mine, he told me if there is peace will come, just a mutual benefit on economic. And it's all about priorities at the end. And we need just to find what the community needs. We're not going to decide. We cannot decide what they need. And yeah, I'm just a dancer for this thing. And for your question, it's a beautiful question. I like it because I came up from Germany. When I came back from Germany, I want to do things with youth, actually. And then I found that it's okay. In order to have a huge impact, first you have to start with the one who's in charge in families. Who's in charge? Women, right? And even in Arabs, means they look like they are in charge, but actually inside the house is not. And the good thing that this year I'm writing a new program for job creation for youth. It's a new job creation for youth, and now it's the time. You start with the powerful member in the family, and then you try to get new sectors within this adding layer. Yeah, women, I think they are the key of change as well. They are much easier for sure to work on, but the impact of them, it's much higher. Youth, they are the hardest, one of the hardest. The hardest one is men, actually. It will be the men. This is even though I'm a man, like it's not. It will be I think the most challenging community sector to include and to develop. Let's say work with them. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but this is how the dancing I started with in this project. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm continuing with the temporality aspect in our project. Basically, the interventions were designed to be temporal with the aim of having these longer-lasting products, as I call them, to remain, and that's still subject to future research that we hopefully can do. But also, I didn't really mention it precisely, but we were always working with practice partners, because we as a project would be we wouldn't have enough resources to implement everything by ourselves. And like for example, working with the design professor at the university, she actually took over the approach. She was doing similar things before, but now she's having different seminars without my involvement anymore, using that approach in a way. Or the other one we did in Erfurt with the graffiti. We also had Practice Partners, which is a grassroots initiative on activism in football. It's called Spirit of Football, and they are working with schools, for example, and with together as a consequence of working with us, they also now implement school workshops with that kind of idea. So this is something we hope that will remain without us, and that was also part of the logic. And then at some things just we had different outcomes than we were expecting. Like I have mentioned that after the graffiti was set up in Erfurt. The children, they came from a house of social work mostly, and we spoke with the social worker from there, and she explained us that later on they really demanded to have more space for graffitis and so on, and then they were actually managing, to get more legal walls. In that place, but I think it was nice to see that the children now demanded their, or we actually maybe empowered them to ask for being seen, and so yeah, this is some side effects, yeah, that we didn't really plan for, but were there, and yeah. So the question: did we change the place? Let's see. I have another question, if I may continue with questions to Katja and Tim, actually, because you established the hashtag Du bist am Zug. And I found it really interesting to think about not knowing about the reactions. And I'm wondering if the hashtag was actually being used in social media to bring that analogous intervention to the digital space. And did people use it to only to spread the project, or did they also use it to show their own contributions also in the digital space? And if yes, were there any reactions? Did you look at that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll take a few more questions, and then you can refer to. Michal, is the mic still with you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for these super interesting presentations. So a question for Tarek and also for Katja and the team. So I'm interested in the spatial diffusion of the beehives across the city. Do you see any particular pattern? For example, does this move from one roof to a neighboring roof, or from one neighborhood to another? And do you see signs that this is percolating to other neighborhoods of the city in which you do not actively promote this project? And for Katja and Tim, I think it's fascinating that this sort of old world analog technology seems to be more dialogic and perhaps reflect better the preferences of people in relation to new social media technology. So maybe it would be interesting to formally compare the mixture of topics or images versus words that you see in your project in comparison to certain social media sites.
If you can please transfer the mic to the gentleman in the back. Anyone else with questions? Okay.
Thank you. I have a comment on the domestication of graffiti. I saw that you raised these issues. I agree. I mean, I personally like more illegal graffiti because it's more democratic, I would say, and it's without any content, let's say, control. The artist can draw whatever they want. It's not like in a gallery that they have to follow guidelines, editorial content restrictions, and so forth. But regarding the gallerization of graffiti, it's true that to many it may seem like an animal in a wild zoo, as Banksy famously said years ago. But many do. currently many do. Graffiti writers, they do this stuff. So they bomb at night, illegally, and they exhibit during the day in galleries, they sell canvases. So part of the subculture has accepted it. We need to accept it. I mean, we might not like it, but it's an evolution of the subculture. But even from the very beginning, I'm talking about the 70s, early 80s, we had some examples of writers in New York exhibiting canvases. Exceptions, I would say, but we can say, for example, I interviewed years ago Zephyr. Zephyr is a legend, is a New York graffiti legend from the 70s. That's what he told me. I wanted to be a commercial artist and graphic artist even before age 13 and 14. We talk about the mid-70s here, right, in New York. So I was exposed and very enamored of this kind of graphic. I wanted to do posters and book covers even as a child. This is what I was working towards. Graffiti was more something you did that was naughty, antisocial, and you did it on the weekends. It was like if you were playing music on the weekend with your band, but during the week you were a lawyer. Real art, graphic art was what I was going to do. And I was going to go to art school and be a famous graphic artist, while graffiti was the thing I did on the weekend. And it was not so smart to tell people. This is what happened in the 70s. And also, Style Wars, documentary of 1983, right? Directed by Tony Silver and produced with Henri Chalfant, no? Well, in certain scenes of the film, so it's a film of the early 80s of graffiti in New York scene, certain scenes epitomize the transition of graffiti into galleries. For example, the film features a gallery exhibition of graffiti-inspired canvases in the early 80s.
I will have to ask you to shorten the question.
Yeah. And one young graffiti writer in the movie says, "Forget about trains. I want to make money. It feels good. When was it the last time you made $2,000 in a month?" These are indeed the times when the most famous graffiti writers became high in demand. And this was in the early 80s. So let's accept this evolution. And the seeds of this evolution can be found in the very beginning of the movement. Just I wanted to do this comment.
So I'm sorry, but we're again with the problem of temporality. So we're reaching the end of our time. So just if you, I know, but I'm sorry, I have to conclude. So if really in a word you are able to say something, if not,
Okay, just in one word. The hashtag, yes, people did use it to exhibit their works as I participated, and then people also used it just to exhibit things that had nothing to do with the project, just to advertise themselves, as it happens. Comparing the mixture, it's a very good point. I think we need a little bit more projects because social media is so huge. But eventually, I think it would be a great idea to compare it and to think why is it different. Hopefully, yes.
We're doing a lot of data collection. We don't have budget to do analysis and research analysis, but we have a huge data. For example, honey production compared to the areas and the green elements that exist. It was so surprising last year. In Kufr Aqab, the area that doesn't have a green, it was the most actually honey production in this area. It was horrible for me. I think it's just a matter of time till we will do a lot of analyzing the data that we have. Thank you.
Sounds like potential collaboration here. So I really appreciate all the collaborators here today with us. Thank you very much for joining us, and good night.
Just wanted to thank you all for coming, for having this wonderful day, very inspiring. I think we saw new and unexpected perspectives and connections, which I couldn't imagine will emerge here. So see you all tomorrow, hopefully, and have a nice evening. Thank you very much.